Recently, I've been busy on this. This is a redesign of my shapecast software. And the idea is to make it easy to make plaster molds like this to slipcast in. I've been very deep in the weeds with the software, basically doing a rewrite from the ground up and doing a bunch of testing, 3D printing, and making new plaster molds. I haven't had a chance to make many pots. Hi, I'm Kent. Let's go ahead and slipcast some pots in my custom molds. As I mentioned, I've been working a lot on the software, and basically that lets you automatically create molds so that you can pour plaster to make slipcasting plaster molds. And here is an example here. This is a bowl form I recently did. However, this mold is pristine. It has never been used, so I haven't had a chance to actually get to making a pot. And this one here is another mold. I've used it exactly once. So I'm gonna go ahead and make some with these, and then might as well do all my other molds as well. And of course, I'll do some handles. The first thing in slipcasting is to mix up the slip. I keep my slip in these 5-gallon buckets here. This is basically the virgin slip that I get in powdered form, add some deflocculant, Darvan 7, water, and mix it up. And this one here is my reclaimed slip. It's been recycled a few times and has some colorants and other random things in it, but still works perfectly fine. I have these 5-gallon buckets and I've added these spigots on them so I can pour the slip out. And hanging out on the bottom is actually a motorcycle lift that lets me raise and lower this whole platform together. So I can lower it down to mix up the slip, raise it up to pour the slip, lower it back down to dump the slip back in. That way I'm not lifting these big buckets and moving them around at all. This part's been working great. So I have a fair bit of reclaimed slip, so I should be able to slip cast all of my molds, and it's been sitting for a while, so it needs to be mixed up. Slip is thixotropic, which means that it is thick when it sits, and it will loosen up as we mix it. And I have an attachment for my drill that I use. So right now you can see how fluid it is. There you go, mixed it for a little while, and it's a much more fluid consistency now, kind of like the consistency of maybe cream, heavy cream. I mentioned I go ahead and make this up from powder. If you're just starting out, go ahead and get pre-made slip. It basically comes as a liquid. Just like when you're starting out glazing, you probably don't want to start mixing your own glazes. So check out your local pottery supply store and ask them about that. So this should be good. Now let me go and raise this up so we can start making some pots. It gets raised and lowered over on this end, and I just use an attachment for my drill. This is my tallest mold right now, so we want to be taller than that, plus a little bit of space for the sieve, so we'll go up a little bit more. There we go, I think that's good. All right, now we need to get everything set up. So let me first do the handles. So I've got 3 different D-shaped handles. I have this ear-shaped handle and this C handle. This one's the newest. I've only used it a couple times as well. I went ahead and took a sponge, made sure there wasn't any excess clay hanging out. We'll go ahead and rubber band these together. And the shapecast molds do come with these notches, these mold keys in them. However, there's a little bit of tolerance there because 3D prints aren't perfect. So you want to look inside and make sure that the handle is actually aligned. That one looks pretty good. All right, here are all the handles set up. Now I can start setting up my other molds. So I already have these 2 that I brought out. Larger bowl, another tumbler form, 12-ounce mug. I've got a couple other molds, so I think I'm going to stick with these right now. So since this is the reclaim in particular, I'm going to run it through my sieve, and then I'm basically going to put some into this container here so I can pour it into my handles more easily. Grab my lid here and use that as a tray. I'm going to do these first because I want them to cast solid. So take some slip, pour it into the hole, come all the way to the top. All right, there we go. And we'll use the excess slip later to attach the handles. All right, now we can start doing the vessels. Let's do the brand new mold. When it's full, it really shoots out. So that's the vessel form, and then up into the slip well. I've used about half the bucket, so it's coming out a fair bit slower now. All right, there we go. So a whole bunch of molds. I'll go ahead and let these sit for 25, 30 minutes. Basically, that's how long between my plaster and my slip I like to get the wall thickness. You can go longer or shorter to get thicker or longer walls. You just need to experiment. Let's come back when it's time to dump out the excess slip. These have now sat long enough that the pot wall has formed. However, there's clearly too much slip still, so we need to dump this out. And I went ahead and pulled out my drainage table. I made this out of a bunch of PVC fittings. Basically, the idea is we're going to dump this out into the bucket and then tip it over here so it can finish draining. So to make things easy to tip out, I want to lower this back down. Makes it easier to get to the top of the bucket. Same drill. Now these will sit for a while longer. Again, for me, another 25, 30 minutes. Basically what's happening during this time is the excess slip is dripping out, which happens pretty quickly, and then the pot firms up. They don't need to sit upside down the whole time, but sometimes I leave them, sometimes I flip them back up, depending on what else I'm doing. These, meanwhile, are still casting solid. I went ahead and topped a couple of them off, although I think they would have been fine. I haven't used these molds for a while, so they're quite dry. Next up, demolding. To start the demolding process, I'm going to go ahead and dump out the excess slip that are in my handles. That will give the ends a chance to firm up while we deal with the rest of the pots, so we can then attach them. Turn these off. I like using my banding wheel, but it's not required. You can do it without one. I did it for a long time without one. And then the other tools I use are this. It's a razor. At this point, it's not very sharp, and just a plastic rib. So for the razor, I basically want to go down to the slip well, although I don't want to dig in, so I'll go at an angle. Just kind of slice over, and eventually, right there, I feel it. Just spin around. I'm really cutting just kind of the pot side. You don't need to go all the way out. And you lift up, pull that off, throw that into the reclaim. That's how all these pots started. And you can just palm these, or I've cut up a bunch of different pieces of cardboard that are various sizes to help catch. That way we don't deform the rim. And we'll see if they're ready. This one may not be. Nope, not yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and set it off to the side and let it dry a little bit more. Now these are seeming pretty stuck at the moment, so we'll give them a little bit longer. depending on the temperature and the ambient humidity, how wet your molds are, the nature of your clay body, these will all shift around in terms of timing. It also depends upon the form itself. Some of these have better draft angles than others. And that one came out, no problem. And then once the pot's out, what I like to do is take the plastic rib and just scrape off all the excess clay. And that also goes right into the reclaim. Just easier to do at this stage when things are still pretty wet. This one's already starting to slide out while it was upside down, so I know it's ready. And it's got a very shallow angle compared to these tumbler forms. And the brand new bowl, it's a little bit smaller than the one I just pulled out. And it came out no problem as well. So these, we just take the rubber band off and then gently pull it apart. Pull it up. And then the sprue is taller, so we can slice it off. I like hanging it over the edge of the wear board. For this, I use an X-Acto knife. Just do a rough trim first, basically right where it starts to flare out. Into the reclaim, and sponge off any extra clay, so they're ready for next time. Trim these off. All right, handles need a little bit more trimming before we attach them. All right, let's go ahead and get our pots out now. Let me do my counting. So this one's got one more. This one's got one more. All right, the bowls are basically done at this point. Next, I'll let them firm up for maybe a day or so and then go and sponge the rims, touch up anything else, but they're basically good to go. And if you just wanted tumblers, these would be the same. You wouldn't need anything else. Some people ask about the 3D printing artifacts. This mold I use primer and sanded it back, and there basically aren't any. This one I use basically straight off the printer because it's one of my tests. And you can just sponge this up really quickly. Normally I'd let this firm up a lot more, but just to show you. Very quick wipe down and it's basically good to go. All right, but I made handles, so we're not stopping at tumblers. It looks like I made one extra handle, so we have some selection. I think that one might work okay. This one, these I made intentionally longer than they need to be, so we'll trim that one back. Do we be cute? Tiny little handle? Yeah, sure, why not? Kind of medium, or larger. Let's do the medium one. Could have planned that out ahead of time, but whatever. So this I'll just throw into the reclaim. However, I can show, you can clean it up. So if you want, at this point, while it's still really soft, just very gently scrape back. Or, if you want, use a barely damp sponge. Same thing. And also wait till it dries. Which is usually what I do for the outsides. But for the inside of the handle, it's easier to get to right now. clay is super soft, so it's really easy to damage. Whatever works best for you. Yeah, not perfect, but less to clean up later. All right, since I just cut these off roughly, they won't match the curvature of the pot. So what we want to do is cut a slight arc into the handle. There we go, something like that. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to fill that in with slip. So I still have my slip hanging out here. Make sure it's still nice and mixed up. I got a paintbrush. Coating a slip on the end here. If these were any drier, you probably want to score it, but since we just slip cast them, not a problem. Let's do it this way, I found. And decide where it's going to live. Give it a gentle push. And there we go, just like that, it's attached. Do the others the same way. Take a look at where I want it. Some gentle pressure. Handles can be a little bit intimidating, but like many things in ceramics, it's all about practice. I saw a tool when I was visiting Heath Ceramics up in Sausalito, north of San Francisco, where they used it to cut their handles for their mugs, and I have thought about doing something similar. However, as I mentioned, I've been in the weeds with shapecast software, so I haven't quite gotten there yet. But it's one of the things I want to try. I think I can 3D print it as well. And I need to turn the pot's right side up in order to judge where the handle goes. I can't see it upside down. Now this one I'm going to want to trim back. And so the trick there is to set it behind the pot, and so you can move it in and out and see where you want it. Although I can't show you and do this at the same time. So to me that looks good, so I'm just going to mark it with my knife. So I'm going to trim off a fair bit here. I think that looks good. Cut the curve into it. And there are our fresh mugs. I'll go ahead and cover these up with some plastic so they dry very slowly. Basically, I want the water levels to all homogenize, become the same. So the slip cast pot, the solid cast handle, and then the wet slip that we just put on to attach it. That way everything gets nice and even, less chance for anything cracking down the road. At that point, these will firm up a little bit more. We can do some sponge work, basically clean off the rim, clean off the handle the rest of the way, let them dry out till they're bone dry, and then I can bisque fire them. However, that'll be a future video. Hope your holiday season is going great. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. Thanks.